The myth I was assigned was Beowulf. Beowulf is one of the earliest existing Germanic epics. It is written anonymously in Old English and takes place in Scandinavia. The Beowulf epic reveals interesting aspects of the lives of the Norsemen who lived in northern Europe during the Bronze and Iron Age prior to the Vikings. In the Germanic tribes, war was a crucial part to their everyday lives. In order for the boys to become men, they had to prove themselves in battle and prove that they were loyal to their king and would protect him over everything. Because of this strenuous view on war, the Northmen who are portrayed as the Beowulf warriors were people of unusual courage, strength, and skill. When the boys became warriors in their society, they received weapons as gift from their chieftain, both as rewards for their accomplishments in battle and as a promise that they would defend him. Because battle was so important in their society, the quality of their weapons was a direct reflection on their social status as well as their courage and strength in battle. Beowulf starts off with the king of the Ring Danes, Hrothgar, deciding to build a high horn gabled mead hall, which serves as the ordinary land during the hero's journey. In the beginning, the mead hall serves its purpose as a place of merriment and enjoyment, where the king's high-born war comrades came to feast, drink, and receive treasure as their reward for bold hearts and battle skills. But after Grendel starts terrorizing the Dane folk and feasting on the warriors at night, it is no longer safe to stay there. The tale of Grendel's treacherous deeds soon reached Beowulf, and with this call to adventure, he knows he must help. When Beowulf gets there, he meets his mentor, Hrothgar. Beowulf crosses the threshold when he sleeps in the mead hall with his warriors, knowing that Grendel will show up that night. Beowulf approaches the inmost cave many times. Once when he goes in search of Grendel's mother in the forest, who, in trying to get revenge for her son, kills one of the king's men. And another time when he goes to his own burial hall many years later in order to fight the serpent that is burning down his village. Beowulf has three major ideals. The first one is when he fights Grendel in Hrothgar's mead hall. The second is when he fights Grendel's mother in her dark, treacherous cave and is almost killed, but survives when he uses her own sword to decapitate her. And the third time is when he fights the fire serpent and kills him, but indefinitely dies in the end. Throughout the epic, Beowulf is obviously the hero. His purpose is to serve and sacrifice, and he does just this by always putting the needs of others first and constantly sacrificing himself for their safety. The outcast, the shadow, the temptress, and the creature of nightmare can be interchanged between the three major villains, Grendel, Grendel's mother, and the fire serpent. Grendel not only tries to bring the downfall of Beowulf, but he is also banished in the beginning of the story for being a descendant of Cain. In these two examples, he is playing both the temptress and the outcast. The fire serpent was definitely a temptress in this epic because it brought the eventual downfall of Beowulf by attacking him 3 times with fire and completely ending his life when he sunk his fangs into Beowulf's neck. All three of these villains, Grendel, Grendel's mother, and the fire serpent, are creatures of nightmare because they are all three monsters that threaten the villain, Beowulf. One of the major scapegoats in Beowulf was Beowulf's war companion, who was maliciously eaten by Grendel's mother and was the main reason they went after her in the first place. Situational archetypes. Beowulf had 3 main quests: killing Grendel, killing Grendel's mother, and killing the fire serpent. In order to kill Grendel, Beowulf and his warriors slept a night in the mead hall in anticipation for Grendel's attack. That night, when Grendel came in for his nightly feast, they were ready for him. Beowulf engaged Grendel in hand-to-hand combat, and although Grendel's mighty battle grip was great, Beowulf's was greater, and he defeated Grendel by ripping his arm out of its socket, causing a mighty death wound that ended Grendel's killing streak. Grendel's mother was so distraught over her son's death that she came to the mead hall seeking revenge. When she got there, she saw her son's arm nailed to the wall and was so furious she grabbed one of Beowulf's men and ate him immediately. When Beowulf heard the cries coming from the mead hall, he ran as fast as he could, and when he got there, he discovered what Beowulf's mother had done. He was so furious that he set out to find Grendel's mother immediately. Beowulf was told that the Jewelless Ones lived in a lonely marshland off the moor. He and his men, accompanied by the Dane folk, set off to find her in her lonely marsh. Once there, Beowulf dived into the marsh and sank down till there was no longer light and his feet could touch the bottom. Once he hit the bottom, he searched for Grendel's secluded sea cave. He swam around looking for the giant, but he could not find her. Suddenly, she swooped up behind him and held him in a grasp that was stronger than the storm wind. Beowulf's magic weapon, his armor, was the only thing that kept the giant from eating him alive. He tried to fight her, but his mighty battle grip alone was not enough to kill her. That's when he noticed the most important magic weapon of all, the wondrous age-old battle sword hanging above the wall of the sea cave. In an old age, it was made by a giant smith for those of his race, and even now, many years later, it was hard for even the strongest man to lift it. However, Beowulf was so enraged that he was strong enough to lift the blade and swing it with enough force to chop off the giant's head. He grabbed both her and her son Grendel's decapitated heads and swam ashore, where he was greeted by his distraught warriors who had feared for his life. They then made the journey back to King Hrothgar and presented their treasures. The king was so delighted that he gave Beowulf all sorts of treasures and even offered him the throne when he died. Beowulf politely declined and made his way back to his homeland. Many years later, with the unhealable wound of old age, Beowulf was the ruler of his kingdom. One day, a peasant slave ran away from his ruler and stumbled upon the serpent's lair. There was so much gold that the slave simply couldn't help himself. When the serpent awoke, it was so enraged that someone had dared stolen his gold that it went on a rampage throughout the village, burning everything it came to. As the king, Beowulf felt it was his duty to stop the dragon. After conferencing with his men, Beowulf went to meet the serpent in battle. Beowulf was burned twice by the dragon's fire, when all of his warriors but one fled. The one remaining warrior, his nephew Wiglaf, who was bold of heart and loyal to his king, ran to his side and helped give him the strength Beowulf needed to raise his treasured sword Nagling and try to fight the dragon. But his lifeless sword betrayed him in his greatest time of need, and in Beowulf's greatest fall, the dragon attacked again and killed the mighty king. Symbolic archetypes. In this epic, death and rebirth are represented in morning versus evening. Beowulf goes into the dark swamp at night to fight Grendel's mother and almost dies, but comes back up the next morning alive. Another archetype that is found is haven versus wilderness. The haven in this story is obviously the mead hall because it is where the people are happiest and safest. The wilderness is actual wilderness that the giants live in, called the bog. Fire versus ice can be represented in many ways in this epic. One way it can be represented is by the warm, always fire-lit mead hall versus the cold, dank, and dreary giant's cave. An opposite way it can be represented is the dragon's hot flame versus Beowulf's cold sword. One of the most important archetypes, light versus darkness, can be represented in Beowulf versus the dragon. Beowulf is the light, the glorious ring king, and the ruler over all, while the dragon is the evil darkness that destroys everything.